Here's a scene from Honkai Star Rail's first arc, the Belobog chapter. In it, the Trailblazer chooses life and its preservation versus the destruction of it by a Stellaron-controlled Cocolia. Behind him, when he resurrects, is the arc's protagonist, Bronya, Cocolia's daughter, the character who we follow and who learns of the issues between the upper and lower class of her world, and Zila, a character from the underground who helped with that understanding. None of this is groundbreaking, but in the climax of this arc, all of its pieces come together to reach a crescendo, with some pretty bangin' music to boot. Let's now compare this to Star Rail's third major arc's climax. In this scene, we have our protagonist being woken up from a dream within a dream after being told the answer to 2 murder mysteries by a man within the dream's dream, after having learned about the meaning of why life slumbers by a character shackled with death, all to face down the embodiment of control who's fused with a man named Sunday, someone who wants to force people to be asleep within the dream's dream because he saw a bird get hurt once. Only the Express faces him as his sister sings in the background. Penacony might have too much going on, but its biggest problem is that what it does have going on isn't there. So let's go through what we have here in just this moment in the climax and what it traces back to answer the question of whether this is all a train wreck. Oh, yeah, I guess it is. This conclusion here began with one question. Why does life slumber? And this question knocked over the domino that started the utterly rancid, poopy-walled scribblings of a madman. That is, the mystery portion of this arc's story, which we need to address first. In the most recently released patch for Star Rail, the quest begins by asking the player if they want a recap of Penacony, and in it, the announcer quickly recaps the arc. But mysteriously in that recap, there are some legit wild admissions. Take this one, for example, about Gallagher, where we're told how many mysteries are solved by him in this section of the story.
Gallagher reveals to everyone the truths about the Dreamscape, the Stellaron, Mikhail, and the other nameless.
This is insane. There's so many things said here that the game had to use an Oxford comma to do it. But if you're not convinced, here's Black Swan also saying the same thing.
Despite your efforts to gather information about the 2 victims, you didn't make much progress. But you did learn about the watchmaker from Gallagher.
This arc does an incredible tonal shift near the halfway point of it, so much so that I think a lot of players may have just forgotten what this arc was actively building up towards in its beginnings. As we'll see, the arc was a mystery story, one in which its opening hours, or days when it comes to this arc, focuses on. Here are some of the mysteries. Okay, if you're paying attention, you'll notice almost all of these are explained by one single character, Gallagher.
I'm 13.
In my last video about this, I spoke about how this conversation right here might be the worst conversation in the game's history, and I think I'm spot on about that. This conversation signals the shift away from a mystery story and does so with the grace of a fucking fat, thick gamble.
Bust. Or maybe I'll take it all.
There's such an insane amount of time spent on building up these questions, but all of them get knocked over in a split second in a single conversation. Let's not forget that the entirety of the 2.0 story was set up, leading to a shocking death. But now it feels more like the story was actually just biding its time, because there clearly was not any intent on making this story a mystery, based on the direction after the opening few acts. In a normal mystery story, there's setup and payoff over time as each builds up. One mystery's reveal works as a gateway to another, and so on and so forth, until, at the end, the final reveal works to bring all of the mysteries towards a conclusive aha! In this arc, instead of getting that aha, we get a Galaga! But the reason this all matters isn't that the genre shifted, that's fine. It's what that means to the plotting within the arc itself. Because once again, I'm sure you're asking, how did we go from a murder mystery to killing God? If these mysteries end up being wet farts, which they were, it breaks a full third of this story and makes the buildup of these mysteries feel odd and unimportant. We spend so much time on questions that get resolved so easily that it feels like a different writer came in after the arc's beginning act and was like, again, you can genre shift, but you need to do so with care of what you have narratively. There's a difference between a genre shift, where you move from one type of story to another, and a genre fucking car crash. We didn't need this whodunit nonsense to only completely forget about it, as if it never happened at the halfway point. And this doesn't only hurt the plotting of the arc, but also the tone as well. The mystery section of this arc hits on the idea that you can't trust anyone, and because of that, everything feels closed off and dangerous. But then Gallagher tells us all the correct information, and everything we learn in the Reef area turns out to be true as well, which then shifts the tone to more of a crowd-funded gang fight to kill God. The characters all start choosing to help us, and even the villains start just honestly telling us all of their plans. The secrecy and danger of the first third of the arc is thrown away, seemingly for the sake of plot convenience. Mysteries need to do at least one of three things: exist to prop up character, conceal a greater truth within the text that the reader can solve together with the cast, or lead to shocking developments that shake the plot. Some reveals in this chapter do fulfill these, but the use of a character like Gallagher to exposit mystery reveals breaks every rule here, as it doesn't allow for any of these requirements to initialize. Deleting Gallagher's character and using one of these to solve each of the mysteries that he just solves for us would have made for a much more engaging and entertaining plot, but even the removal of Gallagher wouldn't solve the underlying issue with the first third of this arc's story. The fundamental issue was that the story was plotted in a jarring way, not that a terrible scene happened. It feels like the authors trapped themselves in a corner of too many mysteries, and so wanted to just delete some from existence by having a character just tell us them, so they wouldn't have to waste more time dealing with actually solving them or making them mean more than a few words in a dialogue box. Because again, the heart of this plot isn't the mystery storytelling or the murder mysteries. It's the theme of freedom and that question of, why does life slumber? But don't get it twisted. I think these writers are legitimately terrible at writing reveals to anything. Let's just go through some. When speaking to Sunday near the end of the arc, it's revealed in a flashback that we actually did solve the mystery of Mikhail, the watchmaker, on our own, and now know that Misha, this busboy, is Mikhail. But how did we figure that out? Well, I'll give you a second to guess. Here's a list of possible answers. It's not that one, or that one, or that one, or that one. You're all wrong. Turns out Himeko had a hunch.
Himeko, I still don't get it. Why were you so sure that Misha had a connection with this dream bubble?
I wasn't sure. It was just a hunch.
Oh my god, bro.
The biggest mystery in this entire arc is solved by Himeko because she had a hunch. This is the worst reveal in any game that I've ever played, and I think it will take a very, very long time for this to be topped. Instead of having our characters literally use their brains at all, the writer just couldn't figure out how to do it. So they once again just have one character say the reveal. Now, this isn't the only bad reveal related to the Express either. When Welt is talking to the big bad, he reveals that it's not the god Shipe who's controlling the dreams on Penacony like everyone thought, but instead the god of order. And he knows this because I'll let you guys try and guess again. No, it's not because he had a hunch. Of course not. It's because he read it in a book.
Though an eon may perish, paths with no masters still linger. In the all-forgiving harmony, echoes of bygone dissonance may subtly arise.
Mr. Yang, being overly astute can be a detriment. Especially when you find yourself alone.
I don't think I need to beat a dead horse here, but this obviously should have also been a big reveal. But instead, it isn't. So let's look at another fumbled reveal. The largest reveal in the entire arc. The reveal that we've been in a dream the whole time. Another dream. A dream within a dream. This is also solved off-screen by other characters who aren't our main characters. Black Swan says she figured it out when they were in the dream when she looked through your memories and saw Misha, the busboy. But not only do we not see Black Swan figure this out, isn't this, I don't know, an awful way to end the Order's dream trap? To have some other character piece together information off screen and then just decide to wake us up? Once again, the only reason this is solved is that our character happened to know Black Swan. Nothing our characters do actively solves this mystery either. If the cast hadn't met Black Swan, we'd still be stuck in the dream right now. So back to the picture that we have here. After a third of time spent on wasted build-up and tonally inconsistent storytelling, we now have the plot set up for what's happening here. There were deaths. Those deaths were solved by a character. We learned some stuff from hunches, and now we're out of our dream to face the big bad. But notice anything weird yet? Well, who really is this? I haven't talked about Sunday at all, and where are Robin and Firefly, the people who died? Didn't they play key roles akin to Zila and Bronya, but less gay? Let's talk about this arc's character usage. This arc continues the trend started in the Lawfu, where characters merely exist to be led around by others like dogs, while others show up like a sitcom only to leave stage left. Hell, listen to this. This is basically Himeko's first outing in the game, and the arc centers on a character that used to be the Astral Express's engineer, the Watchmaker. Himeko is the navigator and engineer of the current Express, so you'd think we'd get some nice parallels and definitely, at least, some interesting interactions between both of these characters. You know, the navigator and engineer meeting the past engineer whose persona is a clock, which is supposed to be a compass used for navigating. She's even the one that solves the Misha mystery too, so you think she'd even have interactions with him, as he's basically a manifestation of the Watchmaker himself. She gets nothing here on this world. Say it with me. You could remove Himeko from Penacony. You wouldn't have to change much about the arc. I said this before and I'll continue to say it. If you can delete a central character from a story and almost nothing changes about that story, then you have a big problem. And almost every Express crew member can straight up be deleted here once again, which means they're not essential characters for this arc. I ask the question again, why do we have so many characters in the Express if they never really matter anyway? And who's this? Well, this is Aventurine, someone who, near the end of this arc's mystery vacation, ends up hogging a pretty hefty chunk of screen time, like a little piggy boy. And look, when this story came out, I was a defender of it, and Aventurine. His story is a more character-oriented piece about someone who's always betting their life, learning to live again by sacrificing themselves in a spiritual journey. It's pretty great, and I still do stand behind the idea that the Aventurine stuff is pretty great. Of the 2.1 story stuff we got, Aventurine's is a huge light compared to the Gallagher reveal hell. However, what the arc does with him later is really quite bad. Aventurine went from being afraid of death and not valuing his chip to understanding what life is really about in his seeming final moments. Now, we obviously know this wasn't death, but just him waking up, which metaphorically works with him waking up about the value that his life holds. One would expect now that Aventurine would have a new outlook on his bets and his life. So, the first time we see him after his death, he has this conversation with Jade. And in it, he bets his life again.
But if it's just a friendly bet, I'll put on the line what I did when we first met. I'll bet my life, ma'am.
We literally got a scene in the last chapter about how Aventurine was afraid to die, but was throwing his life around willy-nilly because he didn't understand why life was even worth living. And when he leaves the dream, he literally says he will value his life more because of his sister. All of this to then bet his fucking life on a silly bet with Jade in the next actual scene with him is shockingly bad. Literally, you only have to write this as him betting something else with Jade. Jade being a little shocked and then trying to up the ante by saying, hey, maybe you should bet your life, and then him refusing. That would show the development that he's had, and it's really actually the most obvious way to write the scene after what he's experienced. But instead, he's literally back at square one again. I could see someone saying, well, he understands the value of his chip now, but that doesn't mean he's not gonna bet anymore when he's certain. But just think about that for a second. If that were the case, when we already know he values his life and wants to continue it for his family, why in God's name would you write that he's willing to throw away his life again in the first scene that we see him back? I've never actually seen a character destroyed in one sentence before, so this was impressive. It might actually ruin whatever arc existed prior, because it's telling us that, well, they weren't going for an arc. But what was also definitely ruined with Aventurine was, well, what the point of all of it was. Aventurine was the first to leave the dream world and wake up. Okay, that's interesting. So what do the writers do with that? Nothing. It seems Aventurine just woke up and hung out for a bit and called the IPC, because for the rest of the main arc, he does actually nothing else. So why spend so much time on him and make Aventurine wake up here to have him do nothing to assist the rest of the characters after in the climax? It's almost exactly like the mystery portion of this story. It's almost like things aren't building upon each other to actually reach a satisfying climax. But we'll get there. They destroyed any semblance of a character arc in one conversation and then throw his character to the side for the rest of the story, meaning he did nothing for the plot other than get a character to slash their sword, sending the characters into the deeper dream by accident, and he did nothing for his own character growth. The only way his story works is thematically, as the idea of death and regret is a large aspect of Penacony's story, as it's once again tied to the theme of freedom, which we'll talk about in a bit. But we really don't need more emphasis on this theme, since the rest of the plot already does this, especially if we're going to get such catastrophic dropped balls as how Aventurine was handled. But this arc did have characters, and it really did use a lot of its time to tell their stories. The Xianzhou had cool designs, but as I've said, the characters were utterly terrible. Where Eureka 6 had a focused character-centered narrative, the Xianzhou used its characters in a relay race to see who would pass the exposition baton to the next. It was absolutely nausea-inducing and has made the, albeit better returns to the planet worse because of it. But Penacony has the opposite issue. Everyone that this arc has introduced has made me want to know more about them and root for them. They're interesting and layered characters at times, which is again a huge reason why I'm so disappointed with how Aventurine was handled. A particular standout character for me though, however, is actually Acheron now. And look, she was here at the climax. What are characters doing here? That's weird. Throughout the arc, we're sorta only given bits and pieces of Acheron, and near the beginning of the story, her usage felt odd, and at times, bad. And at times, it was.
Because the conversation coming up will last forever.
With absolutely overly philosophical dialogue, her character started to feel like a LaFu character, until the end came. We come to learn that Acheron is essentially a guide to the dead, to help those at the end cross over and accept death as someone essentially cursed by it. It's revealed that she came to Penacony to help solve the regrets of one of the past Nameless, one that left his his fellow Nameless on Penacony. Sadly, he was never able to return and see him again before his passing. The anguish and regret he felt from this caused him to be unable to pass on. Acheron, while at the river Styx basically, vows to help him pass, and so she goes on this journey. All of it just to help him rest. And we get all of this in out of context vignette scenes, like the best scenes from Aventurine's portion of the story. It's good shit. All of this really connects the dots with Acheron as a character, making her feel like a fully fledged one. And as we'll see, it makes her the character with the most true emotional impact in this arc. When she finally is able to truly say that she completed her mission, you feel it at the end, because the arc didn't beat you over the head with her mission the entire time. Instead, the arc gets you to understand her struggles, even if those are really heavy-handed though. The scene with her and Welt from the previous video is recontextualized by the arc's ending. It isn't only a nod to Honkai Impact III, but also a recounting of the pain and suffering that she's been through, understanding that she continues forward in the face of such turmoil, all the while still choosing to help those at their lowest. It really characterizes her extremely well. Do I think she's still annoying at times? Yes, but I can absolutely see what they're doing with her here, and I kinda love it. Also, a Honkai Impact III crossover is happening. We know that's gonna be a shit show. But I can see a lot of people not caring about Acheron by the end because we really did focus on the Honkai Impact connections and the weird philosophical diatribes with a lot of her time in this arc too. But the revelation about Acheron and how resolute she was in her mission tells us more about her in just a few scenes than maybe any character in the game so far. She's someone who's been shackled with literal death, and instead of backing down, she's facing it head on. Instead of accepting what's been done to her, she's actually challenging fate. Keep that in mind. But sadly, you wouldn't know all of this if you were just moving through the story, because her final scene is optional. Why? Why do they keep doing this? I had to sit through whatever the fuck this was. But you thought a final scene with a character would be just wasting my time too much. Regardless of this weird optional choice, I really went from not liking Acheron at all to being okay with her, to loving what they did with her in just a few scenes. And again, it's how it all wraps up that really cements her character for me. As we'll see, almost every other character in this arc has an aspect that's a pretty massive letdown, either because they drop the ball heavily or because they don't follow up with them in any meaningful way. This also applies to, sadly, Firefly. Firefly has a fantastic start in the arc. At the arc's beginnings, we're told that Firefly is grappling with an illness that causes her to fade away. In the real world, Firefly inhabits a cold, mechanical body, and she isn't able to truly be herself. So here in the world of dreams, Firefly is able to finally be who she chooses to be. She can forget about her illness for once in her life and truly live her life. And then she dies. This beginning makes it seem like the rest of the arc will be about figuring out what happened to Firefly and why. But like I said, that's not the case. And it's also not the case that Firefly is really essential to this arc at all. Like with Aventurine, post her time in the sun, Firefly gets melted. We find out she really didn't die, but after that, she's kind of just along for the ride. We do an utterly pointless tournament, which I'll talk about in a bit, and then Firefly suddenly changes her tune about everything she said at the beginning of Penacony. She goes from someone who wants to stay in the sweet dream to someone willing to face her own death in light speed time. Either she gets off-screen development, or she's someone who was always willing to come to Penacony knowing she could die and couldn't stay. It's definitely the second one, and not only is that boring narratively, it's also probably the worst writing decision they could have made for her. Instead of us seeing her grapple with having to return to the real world and what that means for someone with a debilitating, seemingly incurable illness, we get a girl that's, I guess, already dealt with all of that. All right, why does Star Rail seem so intent on showing us characters who were basically at their end state? Firefly seemingly grappled with nothing now. She has a prophecy to fulfill, barely made grapples with it for 2 seconds on a building, and then just moves on and does her duty like she's told. Is that not extremely uninteresting to anyone else? Rule 1 for characters is not to have them static like this. Just like with Aventurine, we get no real growth or inner conflict with Firefly, only the appearance of one, which is a really important distinction. She's the same at the beginning of this arc than she is at the end, which is a really huge flaw. Other than Yurilo 6, you could count on one hand how many characters in this game actually get any arcs or growth. Almost everyone seems static. And skipping crucial points also seems to be the name of the game with Firefly, as she quite literally flies off to do, I don't know, something before the climactic fight of the arc with Sunday here.
My job here is done. But you didn't do anything.
May we meet again
in reality.
We even get this weird plot point about 3 deaths with Firefly, which in retrospect seems like it was written as bait to have players come back every single time, because the final death is actually just Firefly flying away with fireworks, which kind of brings up questions about the whole nature of fate in this game and what Elio's role really is. If Elio told Firefly that she died 3 times at Penacony, and each of those times is simply her thinking that she's going to die, that really begs so many questions, like, is Elio writing from other people's perspectives when reading the future? Firefly doesn't die, obviously, which means the prediction is wrong, unless the prediction is predicting how Firefly thinks events are going to be. So is the final battle with Anouk and the supposed losses that happen based on us thinking that we're gonna lose? What's going on here? What's also bad is Robin and Sunday's usage here. I can already hear ya. Sunday and Robin are essential for this arc, and yeah, they are, but did we really have to backload their entire characters? It's another case of this arc feeling like 2 different writers wrote each half, because in what I can only imagine was an odd case of amnesia on the part of the writers, in the final moments before this arc's climax, we start getting segments with Sunday and Robin, like really crucial ones. Before these scenes, we had only seen Robin 3 other times in the chapter. One to establish her voice being off, another for establishing the powers of the harmony, and the last for being dead. Sunday isn't much better. Yes, we got him in Aventurine's section of the story or in cliffhangers, but those only set up how much he cares about Robin or to make him look mysterious. So to have the first time we really spend any time with these 2 critical characters for the arc to be here in the arc's final hours is just really, really odd timing. And it's odd because, as we'll see, almost the entire arc's plot ends up hinging on this pair's relationship, with Sunday even being the arc's true human antagonist. This would be akin to having Cocolia and Bronya only appear in the arc's final third. It would be nonsensical storytelling. Like, after looking at all of these characters, I have to ask the question, just who is the protagonist here? Protagonists drive the plot, meaning they're central to the events happening, as well as developing and facing opposition throughout, whether that be external or internal. So Bronya was obviously the protagonist of Yurilo 6, and Dan Heng kinda, sorta was on the Luofu. Again, we've talked about that, it's bad. But here, who is it? It's not Aventurine, or Firefly, or Robin. They each have their own issues, as they either don't connect to the larger plot on the world, like Firefly or Aventurine, since they skedaddle, and it's not any of these people. You could argue that it's the Watchmaker, but he's more so an idea here, symbolizing the themes and a catalyst for the events, rather than a character actively involved in the plot. This plot is so muddled that I'm over here unsure of who this story is even about. Obviously, the story is supposed to be an ensemble, but an ensemble requires that the characters all have some sort of equal importance to the plot. But once again, they don't. If it's hard for me to pinpoint a protagonist, then calling this an ensemble seems to also be difficult. Instead, it shows the problem. With a real ensemble cast, there would be an argument for each character to be a protagonist in their own right, but that simply doesn't exist here. And so this arc, like the Luofu, has me questioning the entire structure of character writing itself. Look, from a purely procedural sense, all characters are tools in storytelling. They're meant to say something or represent something or elicit something within the viewer. Look to someone like Gallagher. He's the most obvious example of it. He's literally the personification of exposition in every sense. Like, he's actually the leftover essence of someone meant to just tell us things. It's so on the nose that it's actually a great teaching tool for what exposition should not be. But the issue is, things shouldn't be that obvious. It should exist on a more subconscious level rather than a a literal one. But Star Rail either has characters have obvious roles like Gallagher or even Sunday, where it's so obvious that they're beating you over the head with what their purpose is, or they exist as placekeepers with no real role to speak of other than to forward the plot and sell more characters. And all of this is such a shame for a game that also places a decent amount of time, effort, and complexity into its themes. So let's talk about the underpinning of this entire arc, the themes, by first talking about whatever this was. In a weird heel turn, the arc goes from a mystery-oriented story centered on Aventurine and Firefly to a philosophical one centered on Robin and Sunday in the span of like minutes. In this scene here, we get this really weird scene at this point in the story where we're now supposed to believe that Penacony itself, the golden hour itself, is actually detrimental, that the entire dream world concept is nefarious. But let's actually just look at the scene. After Robin's death, she decides to talk to random NPCs about why they're here on Penacony, as she's really questioning its purpose now and whether being there is actually bad for a person. One NPC tells her that he's here because he's dying in the real world. Essentially, this is the only place that he can be without constant pain from his debilitating illness. And like, damn, the game absolutely went out of its way to give us the best possible explanation for why one would really want to spend the rest of their life here in a dream. I mean, Firefly had a similar moment earlier in the arc. She expressed how here she gets to be her true self. So absolutely give the game props for presenting the best argument for why someone really want to spend the rest of their days here. And the true answer really is when your days are truly numbered. The game clearly at this point is saying that Penacony can actually be incredibly positive, right? So what was Robin's response to this? Does she change her mind and actually agree with the guy, showing that the dream world is actually more intricate and morally complex than one would think, like how the game has portrayed it thus far? No!
Remember the old man we met earlier? Without this dream, he might have completely lost himself.
That might be true, but even without Penacony, he could have chosen another path. As far as I know, the Intelligentsia Guild has been promoting their rehabilitation techniques for a long time now.
I guess pull yourselves up by the bootstraps, you dumbass sick bitch. So Robin just basically says this guy is a bullshitter who should have tried harder, and that actually maybe modern medicine could fix him without knowing what he really has or if it really could. It's a weird line here, and one that's meant to make the player side with Robin, but it actually made me do the complete opposite. I mean, is it not a completely valid reason to want to stay in this dream instead of, I don't know, dying or being in a constant state of pain? Because, I mean, that's all this really is. The dreams themselves appear to basically just be another plane of existence. It's not like being in the dream is doing anything other than manipulating things like gravity and logic. You essentially get to be in another world as yourself. Again, the writers have said this before with Firefly. Firefly's issue at the beginning is that she appears to be struggling with staying in the dream or continuing her mission. The issue was never, is the dream world bad, but rather, why is the dream world currently tainted? Again, Death's appearance in Penacony is meant to be an anomaly, and the game makes it clear that without its presence, people are actually safe here. And we come to learn that, well, even with its appearance, people are still legitimately safe, with one exception. There's nothing aside from Sunday at the beginning of this arc to signal that there are actual issues with Penacony itself, and even when it is revealed later that the one exception is that the God of Order is in control here and taking people's life force with a Stellaron, that's once again not the fault of the world being one of dreams. This whole philosophical debate that this arc seems to be hinged on is quite literally gibberish with what we've been shown. But it appears the writers thought about this too and agreed. And so instead of having our characters continue to disagree with the concept of a dream world in essence because they have a different worldview, the writers decide to come up with the biggest cop-out imaginable in a story like this, to explain why Penacony is actually bad and staying in the world is harmful. Well, the truth is actually there's a Stellaron here. And you see, the Stellaron here is actually hurting everyone because of the god of control, using it to siphon people's lives. And actually, if people stay, then they really won't be themselves anymore because the god of control could take over them too. So then what the fuck was the point of this giant philosophical discussion? This chapter wants to be an intense analysis on the idea of control versus freedom, or the idea of escapism versus growth. In other words, why life slumbers. For the game's main plot, it's the express versus fate, really. But instead of actually having this legitimately compelling discussion, the game sidesteps this introspection by placing a Stellaron in the way. Now our main characters don't destroy the world of sweet dreams because they disagree with it on some ideological level. No. Instead, it's because the world has a Stellaron and there's a bad god here. But the question now becomes, if the Stellaron wasn't here, and it really was the god of harmony this whole time, would they have disagreed with Sunday's plan of keeping people in the dream to keep them safe? And if they did disagree, would they have tried to fight him and stop him still? It's almost like there's a much more thoughtful and well done version of the story already out. We're blocked from this interesting hypothetical because that's what it is, hypothetical. The game didn't want our characters to do something that the audience might not agree with, so instead we get a Stellaron here and an unequivocal bad ending for people who want to stay in the sweet dream. I absolutely despise when stories do this, when they flirt with the philosophical, when they pretend to have some ideological disagreement that results in a drawing of lines, only to then give one side the clear moral authority in the argument by adding an unequivocal bad variable into the mix. It's like a straw man argument. Okay, I'll ask you a similar hypothetical and you've got to choose one. Would you rather live never being able to eat the foods you want again? Or would you rather live in a world where you can only eat one type of food forever? And that food is actually just nails. And those nails are poisoned. Let's be honest here. Is the Express crew really gonna tell this old man to grow the fuck up and go die in the real world for the sake of self-growth? Well, now they don't have to, because they can just say that the Stellaron would have killed him anyway. And this seems especially egregious, as we even have Firefly herself say that many on Penacony are actually interstellar refugees. But hey, it's not bad that we're killing people and making refugees worldless again because we have a Stellaron to destroy. Do you see the issue with laying out the philosophical battle like this? The Stellaron kneecaps all conversations and makes all of the philosophical debate utterly pointless, and it certainly feels pointless from the perspective of the characters. I mean, the arc literally says all of this is pointless at the end, when the world of sweet dreams basically stays the exact same way, except capitalism fixes it. It's a good thing the Express has shares in the world. I'm sure that means something. Or what does this mean? What does this mean? But the actual theming under the arc is, surprise, legitimately excellent. Oh, fucking swerved your ass. I like something. Fuck off. This arc is about control versus free will, destiny versus freedom. Why does life slumber? In the course that we all chart for ourselves in life. It's heavy and interesting thematically, and some of this really pays off. Like I said before with Acheron, she fits this theming to a T, but the one thing I think works the best is actually a character from the beginning of the arc, Clocky. I mean, sorta. I mean, the Watchmaker. Mikhail, the Watchmaker's final wish was to protect a world of dreams, one in which he helped create. Penacony used to be a prison planet, one that was stifling and cruel, but the Trailblaze appeared and quite literally blazed a new path for the planet, igniting hope and charting a new course for those without it, literally making the impossible possible by harnessing dreams themselves, a physical manifestation of the power of hope to change a dire situation into one of new opportunities. When Mikhail was a child, he mistook his father's compass as a pocket watch, as they lived in a watch shop. While a clock ticks away without regression, a compass is a tool used to steer your own fate in the direction that you choose. This representation of the Trailblaze is truly beautiful. In the face of the oncoming storm of destiny, with enough willpower and hope, one can chart their own path through fate and steer it towards a new future, harnessing even destiny itself. Firefly, stricken with a seemingly incurable illness, Aventurine, a slave for most of his life, Acheron, shackled by death itself, and even our Trailblazer, infused with a Stellaron and attached to a cruel destiny, all can find hope in their lives and choose to push forward in the face of the seemingly insurmountable. These themes aren't only apparent with the characters themselves, but also the world at large. Penacony as a world is the most fleshed out and cohesive that we've seen yet, with incredibly designed locales that all go back to this theme of control versus freedom, with the aesthetics of the 1920s, a time in the US where immense societal change was happening after the world faced World War I. Again, fitting the theme of choosing growth in the face of adversity. So much came from the 20s, like movies with sound or jazz music or women being allowed to vote. Oh my god, get that woke shit out of my games. The world of Penacony is wearing its inspirations on its sleeves, and it makes it truly feel unique and inspired. It's by far the best designed world in Star Rail, just because of its cohesion with its themes, but also because of the lore and world building that's in every nook and cranny, and it's also just enjoyable to explore. Star Rail finally brought back fun exploration, and it's back to being quirky and cheeky with its writing, which is where a lot of the fun of the initial release came from in the world exploration. Regardless of how great this world is design-wise and exploration-wise, the way it enhances the story is with how it connects to the theme. And this world truly did take me by surprise with how it was able to illustrate the theme of growth and freedom in such profound ways. It might be the best theme and message that I've seen from any Hoyoverse game yet, and I'm really happy with how it connects to the larger story and battle with Nanook. And again, each character does connect to the theme, and I really do think that it's important to note that and talk about how impressive that actually is. Alright, another things I like. Fuck this game, the antagonists are bad. Sunday is the epitome of a character that is thrown together at the 11th hour. We literally go through events in Sunday's life to explain why he is the way that he is in record time, as it all happens in one ultimate explain-a-thon in one scene. We get to see how a bird died once, and like a dude was shitty to his kid, and like Robin got hurt, and like how all of this led to Sunday thinking that order is much better than freedom, that some people need to be cared for forever to protect them, and because of that, we should take away their freedoms. It's an interesting idea for a villain, one that has existed before, like with the theme, but I'm not knocking the idea itself, because some stuff has done this well before. What I am knocking is the insane exposition dump that we get here and how backloaded all of this is. We really speed run through Sunday's life so that we can know why he's the way that he is, as he's the main antagonist here, which I guess this is better than not knowing or just having a random last second villain with nothing interesting like Ventilia. But what would be much better is if Sunday's plot was, properly paced out. Why not have us actually spend more time with Sunday and Robin? Whoa! Instead, both of these very crucial characters for the arc are thrown in at the last second so we can explain everything about them in one chapter. No wonder this particular chapter is like 800 million hours long. It's having to do a ton. But the thing is, it wouldn't have to do this. It wouldn't have to do a ton if the legwork was already put in prior to this point. Yes, Sunday is still the game's best human villain so far, but that's only because he is a character. But that doesn't mean he's not a really hastily put together and sloppily dealt with villain. We quite literally stop all action, sense of urgency, and forward momentum in the arc so that we can actually watch parts of his life on TV. He actually chills and tells us to do the same so that we can just decide which side to choose. Am I supposed to believe that telling his story this way is good? It feels like a cartoon villain explaining their plan for no reason. Imagine your favorite villain from your favorite work of fiction. Now imagine if almost everything you knew about them wasn't spaced out properly throughout a story, but was rather thrown into the section right before the hero fights them. It's laughably bad antagonist writing. Also, the game decides to have Sunday explain why his name is Sunday in the most blunt, beat the player over the head with a brick writing I think I've ever seen. He's basically like, Sunday is God's day, and I'm designed with religious symbolism, and on Sundays people take breaks, and I want people to take breaks, so every day should be Sunday. Honestly, hot take, but I think Firefly would actually make more sense being the arc's villain here. I just mean from the writing of the arc's perspective. She's a refugee from a destroyed planet, placed in a suit of armor, all to slowly fade away from existence, someone who feels trapped. She's finally given the chance to be the self that she's always wanted to be, only to have this stripped away if the characters get what they want and stop the God of Order. Honestly, tell me that Firefly being the main antagonist here wouldn't have been more impactful than Sunday. Throughout the arc, she could have moments with the God of Order slipping his way into her mind and whispering to her how she can save people like herself from the horrors she's experienced by bringing them and keeping them in Penacony stream. And we already have so much of her in this first third. But no, instead we gotta have Nepo Baby Sunday be our main antagonist because he saw a fucking injured bird once or something. Also, Firefly being the human antagonist would mean we could get rid of Sunday and Robin altogether, and honestly, they don't feel like they'd be needed here in this version. Otherwise, if you're still gonna have Sunday be the villain, replace Firefly with Robin. Robin's role in the story feels like it overlaps a lot with Firefly's to an honestly weird degree. They both die in the same way from the same thing and both argue for the side of personal responsibility. Hell, even Robin's song is playing at Firefly's critical moment in the beginning of this arc. The main focal difference is that Robin actually connects to the larger plot because of Sunday and her connection to the family, whereas Firefly doesn't connect at all to the main antagonist, which is why replacing her with Robin just makes more sense here. Give her a disease too if you want, thus bolstering Sunday's argument, and have her meet the protagonist at the start. I mean, she's also the one the most inspired by Penacony's design philosophy too, with her 20s inspired design, unlike Firefly. It just feels like Hoyo wanted to include more characters in the arc by having both of them here, when one matters for the plot way more than the other, even though the other gets significantly more screen time. And I mean that. Robin is really shafted here. When she gets pushed into dormancy, we don't see from her perspective at all. We got the same fake out death twice in such a short amount of time from each other too, and it seems like both Firefly and Robin get development off screen while they're in dormancy. I mean, Robin goes from not thinking twice about the dream to literally berating old dying dudes, and Firefly goes from wanting to exist in the dream as the self that she wants to be to, I don't know, willing to die, I guess. So for seemingly such a crucial time in the story to not be shown is incredibly odd, all so that the game can hang a mystery over our heads for seemingly no reason, especially since we have perspective shifting now. Why the hell didn't we perspective shift to Robin while she was in dormancy? Getting some more time with her is crucial because of Sunday's role, and she's actually the only other character outside of the Astral Express who helps in the final battle, which, because we don't really know her at that point almost at all, it feels really hollow. You can keep Firefly dead, quote unquote, and have us follow Robin not knowing where she is or if she's like in an afterlife or a dream or whatever, and then still have the Firefly alive reveal. Hell, they don't make any like hubbub about the fact that Robin's alive. She's just kind of there. Again, Firefly is pretend important for this arc to only develop off screen and seemingly fuck off and die, I guess. So just remove her. If the game wanted to introduce her in this arc and have her take up so much time, then they needed to make it count. Not make it seem like she's a filler character where at every given crucial moment, she flies away. exactly like Adventurine. The characters who don't matter for the climax of this world's plot suck up so much time from the other characters that the most important ones, Sunday and Robin, have to be rushed in at the final moments. But don't get it twisted though. Rushed doesn't mean I think this arc went too fast. This arc, like this video, is too fucking long. Just one of these chapters in this arc took me around 12 hours, which is bonkers. All of the chapters added up basically surpass the length of like a shorter RPG's entire main story. I've come to realize that I have to set aside a ton of time for these main stories in Hoyoverse games, but holy shit, was this one of the longest feeling arcs I think I've ever played. This arc has some of the most head-scratching pacing decisions too, which exacerbates this problem. So let's look at that. It feels like Hoyoverse wrote Penacony as if they were padding time, like they thought they weren't gonna have enough material, all the while adding in the most story of any arc they've ever written. It's like someone with dementia wrote the arc. From forgetting what happened at times, to then reintroducing ideas and points that we've already heard explained countless times, to forgetting what happened at times, to then reintroducing ideas at times, to forgetting what happened at times, and reintroducing ideas at times, to even forgetting what happened at times, to then reintroducing ideas and points that we've already heard explained. It's like a person with dementia wrote this. The arc often clips itself right as it's about to fly, with weird stops and starts throughout the entire thing, with the most obvious and egregious one being that weird tournament that we had to do. What was this? Here's the pacing of this plot. Appear on Penacony, watch your friend die. Oops, gotta walk around and wait for someone to tell us. Whoops, gotta see what Adventurine is up to, I guess. I'm sure that will matter in the end. Oh wait, everything is explained to us now. Let's actually continue with a quicker pace. Oh, nope, we gotta have a tournament to do. This whole time was a roller coaster, but not in a good way. This is why this arc has 758 million ideas. There's just so much. That's why this review is so long. The whole thing feels like a gish gallop. A gish gallop is when someone includes a bunch of shit in an argument to the point to where it's hard to counter any one given thing because there was so much thrown at the person in quick succession. And this arc kind of feels like that in story form. And this is especially true with that final reveal. So let's talk about the reveal that you were in a dream the whole time. What exactly was the point of this? No, like, I understand that the narrative point was to say how powerful the Order was, but there's no deeper point to this plot reveal, right? The reveal happens through Black Swan, and once you're in actual Penacony, you have a conversation about how to pull everybody else out of the dream. But there's no actual meaning to the reveal that everything was in a dream initially. Aside from Misha and Acheron at times, there's no other ways to tell within the story how you're in a dream, which is once again a bad way to do a reveal. But also it doesn't show us anything new about Penacony or any other character or anything we've experienced. Usually a plot device like this, that what was experienced was actually a dream, is used to make the viewer question everything that they read or watched in the story. Take Inception, for example. Spoilers, but the end of that movie is made to make the viewer question whether the character is still in the dream or not, which fits the entire point and narrative and thematic value of the movie. And Dreams Within Dreams is used countless times throughout that film to subvert expectations and tell interesting stories. Here though, it kind of feels like the characters were in a hotel room, say room 102, but then the staff came and said, hey man, our bad, we gave you the wrong key. You're actually in room 101. So you go there and it's the same. Nothing changes. We just now know the room we were in wasn't the real room we were supposed to be in. Why does that matter? The pacing feels so bad because the arc continues to stack superfluous, overly wordy, and chaotic storytelling on top of one another to give the illusion that there's a lot to chew on, which, don't get me wrong, this story does have a lot, but there's also a lot of fatty, inedible meat on the bone that's blocking the interesting stuff. The entire Gallagher character, the distress signal plot, Sunday's convoluted plans to save Robin against Adventurine, the IPC's inclusion at the end of the arc, Jade's odd abilities, the dream within a dream, Firefly's 3 deaths, Adventurine's whole plot, the Charmony Festival competition, just a lot of time in this arc is dedicated to actual noise that in the end doesn't connect to any larger tissue within the plot. It's just there. This arc is summarized by that. A weirdly mixed bag of good and bad ideas and executions. The setups for ideas are sometimes incredible, but the payoffs act as if they didn't exist in the first place. Characters are the same. They'll matter and then they just won't, like Aventurine's death and supposed self-actualization, or Firefly's whole story, the mystery aspect of the story itself, reveals being solved by hunches, or books that characters read, or characters who exist to explain the plot. It's all exhausting and at times legitimately very terrible. And this is the biggest reason why this arc frustrates me so much. In this empty ocean, there are some really beautiful elements, like the beginning of the arc, like the thematic underpinning, like Aventurine or Acheron's portions, but they're always murky. That's why this ending scene feels so hollow, and why for others, it might actually feel impactful. If you really resonated with the actual great theming in this arc or any of the stuff that I talked about, I can see you really digging what's happening here. But if you cared about how the plot was paced, plotted, how the characters were dealt with, the disjointed genre and tonal shift, how the antagonist was dealt with, the overly wordy and convoluted nature of the plot, or how everything was executed in the end, I can see you feeling like I do. Kind of fucking bummed. At times, Honkai Star Rail's Penacony arc can be absolutely beautiful, but at other times, this arc can be pretentious sophistry that seems to herald itself as grander and more deep than it really is, and that's honestly why I feel this way. So, if I had to rank this arc,
what line would you deliver to express your disappointment in Penacony?
I feel like I want to say it's a train wreck, and I feel like this video points to it being a train wreck. But I really do want to at least applaud the world itself, the design philosophy itself, the thematic underpinning itself, some of the stuff with Aventurine, some of the stuff with early Fireflies, some of the stuff with Acheron. There is some good stuff there. It's not like the Sanjo, where it's almost all pointless, but it's still really bad. I really want to stress, this arc is not a good arc as a cumulative whole. It has to be at least off the rails, right? Like I can't go any higher than that. And I feel like for a lot of people, Trainwreck would make more sense, and maybe depending on my mood, that's where I would put it. Regardless, holy fuck, thank you for watching this video. I'm gonna start streaming soon, so follow me on my Twitch right here. Follow me on Twitter for updates about streaming and about videos. I know this took 858,000 years, but so did this arc, and the world's fucking crazy. So thank you so much for following me. Thank you to my Patreon supporters who follow me through all of these lulls and ultimate hiatuses. Thank you so much. Regardless, I will see you all next time.